I knew something was wrong the moment I turned onto Sagebrush Lane and saw my mailbox lying in the dirt like a wounded soldier. This was the third time in 2 weeks, and my patience had officially run out. My name is Daniel Watson, and I had just moved to Desert Springs, Arizona 6 months ago. I bought a nice 4-bedroom ranch house in the Painted Mesa subdivision, thinking I had finally found my slice of peace after 38 years of chaos in Chicago. The house had everything I wanted: a decent-sized yard, mountain views, and enough space to work on my custom furniture business from home. What I didn't count on was the Painted Mesa Homeowners Association, specifically their self-appointed enforcer, a woman named Patricia Whitmore who seemed to think she was judge, jury, and executioner of neighborhood aesthetics. I pulled my truck into the driveway and stared at the flattened mailbox. It was a classic ranch-style design, wooden with a curved top and a little metal horse emblem I had installed myself. Nothing fancy, but it meant something to me because my dad had helped me pick it out right before he passed. Now it was crushed, the post snapped clean in half, tire tracks clearly visible in the gravel beside it. My neighbor, an older gentleman named Frank Daniels, was watering his lawn across the street. He shut off his hose and walked over, shaking his head. "Saw it happen this morning, Daniel," Frank said, his weathered face tight with anger. "That white SUV the HOA board drives around." Patricia was behind the wheel. She slowed down, looked right at your mailbox, then swerved and hit it dead on. Then she just drove off like nothing happened. I felt my jaw clench. "You're kidding me." "Wish I was. This is getting ridiculous." She did the same thing to the Hendersons 2 months ago until they replaced their mailbox with one of those modern metal things she approved. I wanted to call the cops, but Mary told me to stay out of it. He glanced back at his house nervously. "You know how she is." I did know. Patricia Whitmore was 52 years old, had been HOA president for 7 years, and ruled the neighborhood like a dictator. She had shoulder-length blonde hair that she kept in that specific soccer mom style, always wore athleisure outfits despite never exercising, and drove a white Cadillac Escalade with a custom license plate that read HOA Queen. I'm not making that up. She actually had that on her vehicle. The first time I met her was 3 days after I moved in. I was unloading boxes when she pulled up in that Escalade, walked right onto my property without asking, and handed me a binder that was at least 3 inches thick. "Welcome to Painted Mesa," she had said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "These are our community standards. You'll need to review and sign the acknowledgement page by the end of the week. I noticed your front door is painted navy blue. That's not on the approved color list. You'll need to repaint it within 30 days. Desert beige, canyon tan, or adobe sand are acceptable." I had stared at her, genuinely thinking she was joking. "My front door? It's blue. It's a nice blue. It's not approved." She tapped the binder with one manicured fingernail. Page 47. "All exterior paint colors must be pre-approved by the Architectural Review Committee. I chair that committee. Submit your request, but I'm telling you now, blue isn't happening." That was my introduction to HOA life, and it had gone downhill from there. In 6 months, I had received violation notices for my lawn being a 1/4 inch too tall, for parking my work truck in my own driveway overnight, for having my garage door open past 7 in the evening while I was working, and for my mailbox not being architecturally consistent with neighborhood standards. That last one had started this whole mess. I had ignored the mailbox notice because, frankly, it was absurd. My mailbox was perfectly functional and looked like every other ranch-style mailbox in rural Arizona. But Patricia had apparently decided that ignoring her authority was unacceptable, so she had taken matters into her own hands, or rather into her own front bumper. "Thanks for telling me, Frank," I said. "I'm going to handle this." He put a hand on my shoulder. "Be careful. She's got the whole board in her pocket and they can make your life miserable. Fines, liens on your property, all sorts of legal harassment." "She just committed vandalism and property destruction," I said. "That's a crime, HOA president or not." Frank looked skeptical. "Good luck proving it. It's your word against hers, and she'll say it was an accident, or that she wasn't even in the area." I pulled out my phone and took pictures of everything. The destroyed mailbox, the tire tracks, the angle of impact. Then I called the Desert Springs Police non-emergency line and filed a report. The dispatcher was polite but clearly uninterested. Property damage under $500. No witnesses willing to provide official statements. HOA dispute. I could practically hear her eyes glazing over through the phone. She said an officer would come by sometime in the next few days to take a statement. I spent the rest of that afternoon cleaning up the wreckage and planning my next move. I wasn't going to let Patricia bully me into submission. I had worked too hard to afford this house, and I wasn't about to let some power-hungry neighborhood tyrant tell me how to live on my own property. But I also wasn't stupid. I needed to be smart about this. That evening, I drove to Home Depot and started researching mailbox options. I looked at the standard metal ones, the decorative brick enclosures, even the fancy wooden posts with custom designs. None of them felt right. They were all things Patricia could just destroy again or claim violated some obscure HOA rule. Then I had an idea. A wonderful, terrible, perfectly justified idea. I drove home and spent the next 3 hours on my computer, researching, planning, and ordering materials. If Patricia wanted to play games with my property, I was going to install a mailbox she would never forget. Over the next 2 weeks, I worked on my project in my garage, keeping everything under wraps. I told Frank I was working on a custom furniture order, which was partly true since that was my actual business. But the bulk of my time went into creating the most indestructible, legally compliant mailbox in Arizona history. The core was a steel pipe 8 inches in diameter, set in a concrete foundation 4 feet deep. That alone would have been enough to stop most vehicles, but I wanted to be thorough. I encased the entire post in decorative wood that matched my original mailbox design, making it look identical from the outside. The mailbox itself was a custom metal fabrication I had commissioned from a buddy in Phoenix who did work for the city's utility poles. It was designed to look like my old wooden mailbox but was actually constructed from 14-gauge steel with a wood grain powder coat finish. You could hit it with a baseball bat all day and barely leave a dent, but the best part, the piece de resistance, was the defensive mechanism. I installed 4 small motion-activated trail cameras hidden in the decorative woodwork around the base, each one with night vision and HD recording capability. They would capture crystal-clear footage of anyone approaching the mailbox from any angle. I also installed a loud, battery-powered alarm system that would trigger if the mailbox experienced any significant impact, immediately alerting me via my phone. I made absolutely sure everything was legal. The mailbox met all USPS regulations for size, height, and accessibility. The cameras were pointed at my own property in the public road, which was perfectly legal in Arizona. The construction was solid and wouldn't become a hazard if struck. I even painted it in one of Patricia's approved colors, desert beige. I wasn't giving her any legitimate reason to object. On a sunny Saturday morning, I installed my creation. It took me 6 hours, a rented auger for the hole, and 3 bags of quick-set concrete. When I was done, the mailbox looked almost identical to my old one, just slightly newer and cleaner. You couldn't tell from looking at it that it could probably withstand a direct hit from a tank. Frank came over as I was cleaning up, beer in hand. "New mailbox looks good," he said. "Thanks," I replied, packing up my tools. "I think it'll last a while." He gave me a knowing look. "She's going to lose her mind. She's going to lose more than that if she tries anything." I didn't have to wait long. 3 days later, on Tuesday morning at approximately 6:45, my phone buzzed with an alert from the camera system. I was in the kitchen making coffee when I checked the notification and saw Patricia's white Escalade slowly cruising down the street. She slowed as she approached my house, and I watched the live feed as she stared at the new mailbox. I could see her face through the windshield, that calculating expression I had come to know well. She drove past, turned around at the cul-de-sac, and came back for another look. Then she parked 4 houses down and sat there for 10 minutes just watching. I smiled and went back to my coffee. Let her think about it. That afternoon, I got a knock on my door. It was Patricia, accompanied by 2 other HOA board members, Gerald Thompson, the vice president, and Susan Martinez, the treasurer. Gerald was a retired accountant who clearly just rubber-stamped whatever Patricia wanted. Susan seemed more reasonable but was too intimidated to ever contradict their fearless leader. "Daniel," Patricia said with that fake smile, "we need to discuss your new mailbox." "What about it?" I asked, not inviting them in. She handed me a piece of paper. "This is a violation notice. Your mailbox is not approved by the Architectural Review Committee. You need to submit plans and wait for approval before making any exterior modifications to your property." I glanced at the notice, then back at her. "My mailbox is painted desert beige, which is on your approved list. It's a standard ranch-style design, identical to my previous mailbox. It meets all USPS regulations. What exactly is the violation?" "You didn't get pre-approval," Patricia said, her voice taking on that sharp edge I had heard her use with other neighbors. "That's the violation. All exterior modifications require board approval. It's in the CC and Rs you signed when you purchased your home." "I replaced a mailbox that was destroyed," I said calmly, "with an identical mailbox, in an approved color. I'm pretty sure emergency repairs don't require board approval, especially when the damage was caused by vandalism." Gerald cleared his throat. "Now let's not throw around accusations. My mailbox was deliberately destroyed 3 times. I interrupted. "I have photos, dates, and a police report. The last time a witness saw the HOA vehicle strike my mailbox and drive away. That's vandalism and hit and run. So before we talk about HOA violations, maybe we should talk about criminal violations." Patricia's face went red. "I don't know what you're implying, but I had nothing to do with your mailbox getting damaged. Perhaps if you had installed an appropriate mailbox in the first place, it wouldn't have been such an easy target for vandals." "So you're admitting there's a vandalism problem in the neighborhood?" I asked. "That's interesting." Should we be concerned about security? Maybe we should discuss installing neighborhood cameras at the next HOA meeting. Susan actually looked interested in that idea. That might not be a bad thought. We've had some package thefts. We're not discussing neighborhood security, Patricia snapped. We're discussing your unauthorized mailbox. You have 14 days to remove it and submit proper plans, or you'll be fined $500. After that, it's an additional $500 per week until compliance. I leaned against my doorframe. I'm not removing my mailbox. It's compliant with all regulations, postal and otherwise. If you want to fine me, go ahead. I'll see you in court. You can't fight the HOA, Patricia said, her voice low and threatening. We have lawyers, Daniel. We have funds. We can make your life extremely difficult. So can I replied. Have a nice day, Patricia. I closed the door and watched through my window as they walked back to their cars. Patricia was gesturing angrily, clearly worked up. Gerald just nodded along like a bobblehead, but Susan kept glancing back at my house with what looked like concern. The violation notice was dated and official-looking, complete with references to specific sections of the HOA bylaws. I scanned it and sent a copy to a real estate attorney friend in Phoenix named Marcus Reynolds. He called me back within an hour. This is harassment, Marcus said bluntly. Your mailbox replacement doesn't require pre-approval under Arizona law, especially since it was damaged and you're just restoring your property to its previous condition. The fact that they're threatening immediate fines without a reasonable review period is also problematic. You want me to send them a letter? Not yet, I said. Let's see what they do next. What they did next was predictable. At 2 a.m, 4 days later, I got an alert from my mailbox cameras. I woke up immediately and checked my phone. Patricia's Escalade was parked on the street, headlights off. I watched in real time as she got out, looked around to make sure no one was watching, and then got back in her vehicle. She reversed, lined up her shot, and gunned it straight at my mailbox. The impact was spectacular. The Escalade hit the steel-reinforced post at approximately 20 miles per hour, and the results were instantaneous. The front bumper crumpled like aluminum foil. The hood buckled. The airbags deployed with a bang I could hear from inside my house. The mailbox didn't move an inch. The alarm system activated, sending multiple camera angles directly to my phone and cloud storage. I had crystal clear footage of the entire incident, Patricia's face before the impact, the collision itself, and her shocked expression afterward as she sat there with white airbag dust covering her face and designer workout clothes. I got dressed and walked outside. Several neighbors' lights were turning on. Frank was already out on his lawn, phone in hand. Patricia was still sitting in her car, dazed. You okay? I called out, making sure my voice carried to the other neighbors who were starting to emerge. She turned to look at me, and for the first time I saw genuine fear in her eyes. Not fear of injury, but fear of consequences. She knew she had been caught. My brakes failed, she stammered. The car just accelerated on its own. Sure it did, Frank called from across the street. Just like it accidentally hit his mailbox 3 other times, right? More neighbors were gathering now. Tom and Linda Phelps from 2 houses down. Young couple named David and Rachel Morrison from the corner lot. Even old Mrs. Keller from next door, wrapped in a bathrobe, watching with interest. I pulled out my phone. I'm calling the police. You should probably stay in the vehicle until they arrive. You might have injuries from the airbag deployment. No, Patricia said quickly, fumbling with her seatbelt. No police. This was just an accident. I'll pay for any damages to your mailbox. The mailbox is fine, I said, gesturing to the completely undamaged structure. Your car, on the other hand, is totaled. And this wasn't an accident, Patricia. This was deliberate vandalism, and I have video evidence of the previous incidents, too. Her face went pale. You can't prove anything. I held up my phone, showing her the camera footage. 4 angles, high definition, cloud backup. I can prove everything. I dialed 911. The Desert Springs police actually showed up quickly this time, probably because it was a traffic accident with airbag deployment. 2 officers arrived within 15 minutes, Officer Jennifer Castillo and Officer Brian Hayes. They were professional and thorough, taking statements, examining the scene, and checking on Patricia's condition. Patricia stuck to her story. My brakes failed. The accelerator got stuck. It was a complete accident. Officer Castillo examined the vehicle. Madam, your brake lights are functional. There's no indication of mechanical failure. And witnesses say you reversed your vehicle, then accelerated forward directly at the mailbox. They're lying, Patricia said desperately. Daniel has turned the whole neighborhood against me. I have video, I said, pulling up the footage on my phone. Multiple cameras. Here's tonight's incident, and here are the 3 previous incidents where this same vehicle struck my mailbox. The officers watched the footage carefully. The evidence was damning. Crystal clear video of Patricia deliberately reversing, positioning her vehicle, and then accelerating into the mailbox. Officer Hayes took my phone and transferred the files to his official device for evidence. Mrs. Whitmore, Officer Castillo said formally, I'm placing you under arrest for criminal damage, reckless endangerment, and hit and run related to the previous incidents. You have the right to remain silent." Watching Patricia get handcuffed in the middle of Sagebrush Lane at 2:30 in the morning, surrounded by neighbors she had terrorized for years, was surreal. She kept protesting, demanding they call her lawyer, insisting this was all a misunderstanding. But the evidence was overwhelming, and the officers were clearly tired of HOA disputes that crossed into criminal behavior. "This happens more than you'd think," Officer Hayes told me quietly while his partner was processing Patricia. "HOA presidents who think their authority puts them above the law. We had a case last year where an HOA board member slashed someone's tires over a parking dispute. Some people just can't handle having a little power." The Escalade was towed away. Patricia was taken to the county jail. And I stood in my driveway at 3 in the morning, staring at my perfectly intact mailbox, feeling a mix of vindication and exhaustion. Frank walked over, grinning. "That was the best thing I've seen in 20 years. I didn't want it to go this far," I admitted. "I just wanted her to leave me alone." "She never would have," Frank said seriously. "People like Patricia don't stop until someone stops them. You did the neighborhood a favor." Over the next few days, the story spread through Desert Springs like wildfire. The local news even picked it up. HOA president arrested after ramming reinforced mailbox. It became a minor viral story online, one of those feel-good tales about someone standing up to petty tyranny. My phone rang constantly with interview requests, which I mostly declined. The HOA board held an emergency meeting. Gerald Thompson became interim president, and one of the first things he did was issue a formal apology on behalf of the association. Susan Martinez stopped by my house personally. "We had no idea how far Patricia had gone," she said, looking genuinely distressed. "She ran those board meetings like a dictator. Any time someone questioned her, she'd shut them down or threaten them with violations." "I'm so sorry, Daniel. It's not your fault," I said, "but the HOA needs serious reform. This kind of power tripping shouldn't be possible. We're working on it. We've scheduled a full membership vote to revise the bylaws. Gerald wants to implement term limits, require board consensus for any enforcement actions, and create an appeals process for violations. It's long overdue." The legal process moved forward. Patricia's attorney tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutor wasn't interested in going easy. Between the video evidence, the pattern of behavior, and the reckless endangerment involved in ramming a vehicle into a stationary object on a residential street, the case was airtight. Marcus Reynolds helped me file a civil suit against Patricia personally and the HOA for harassment and property damage. "The HOA has insurance for this kind of thing," he explained, "but Patricia is going to be personally liable for the criminal aspects. You're looking at full restitution, legal fees, and potentially damages for emotional distress." "I don't want to bankrupt her," I said. "I just want this to stop." "It's already stopped," Marcus assured me. "Patricia's facing criminal charges. She's been removed from the HOA board, and she's now a neighborhood pariah. The civil suit is just making sure you're compensated for what you went through." 6 weeks after the mailbox incident, Patricia appeared in Maricopa County Superior Court. She had aged noticeably, her trademark confidence completely gone. She pleaded guilty to criminal damage and reckless endangerment. The hit-and-run charges were dropped as part of the plea agreement. Judge Robert Morrison was a no-nonsense type in his 60s who clearly had little patience for HOA drama that escalated to criminal behavior. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, reading through the case file, "this is one of the most absurd cases I've seen in my courtroom. You held a position of trust in your community, and you abused that position to harass a homeowner over a mailbox. Then, when he had the audacity to replace his property after you destroyed it, you attempted to destroy it again, this time with such force that you totaled your own vehicle and could have seriously injured yourself or others." Patricia started to speak, but her attorney put a hand on her arm to silence her. "Your behavior represents everything wrong with homeowners associations when they're run by people more interested in power than community," the judge continued. "I'm sentencing you to 1-year probation, 200 hours of community service, and full restitution to Mr. Watson for all damages and legal fees. You're also prohibited from serving on any HOA board for a period of 5 years. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor," Patricia whispered. The civil suit settled a month later. The HOA's insurance covered most of it, and Patricia was personally responsible for about $15,000. I used the money to install a beautiful rock garden around my mailbox and donate the rest to a local charity that helped families dealing with foreclosure from predatory HOA liens. Life in Painted Mesa slowly returned to normal, though it was a different kind of normal. Gerald Thompson proved to be a reasonable president, focusing on actual community improvement rather than petty enforcement. They repaved the neighborhood streets, organized a community garden, and even installed those security cameras that Susan had mentioned. Turns out when you focus on helping the community instead of controlling it, People actually appreciate their HOA. Patricia moved out of the neighborhood 3 months after her sentencing. I heard through the grapevine that she and her husband bought a condo in Scottsdale, somewhere without an HOA. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. My mailbox became something of a local legend. People from other neighborhoods would occasionally drive by to see the mailbox that took down an HOA president. I even got a call from a mailbox manufacturing company asking if they could use my design as inspiration for a new security line. I politely declined. Frank and I became good friends. We'd sit on my front porch some evenings, drinking beer and watching the sunset over the mountains. "You know what the best part is," he said one night. "People aren't afraid anymore. Last week, Tom Phelps planted roses in his front yard. Red roses. Patricia would have lost her mind now. Nobody cares. They're just nice roses." That was the real victory, I realized, not the arrest or the court case or even the settlement money. It was the fact that people could live in their homes without fear of petty tyranny. They could paint their doors reasonable colors, plant the flowers they liked, and park their cars in their own driveways without someone threatening to put a lien on their property. The HOA still existed and it still had rules. But now those rules made sense. They maintained property values without being oppressive. They organized community events without mandatory attendance. They resolved disputes through mediation instead of threats. It was what an HOA should have been all along. I expanded my custom furniture business. The publicity from the mailbox incident, oddly enough, brought in several new clients who appreciated someone willing to stand up for themselves. I built dining tables, bookshelves, and even a few more indestructible mailboxes for people in other neighborhoods dealing with similar issues. Each one was legal, functional, and completely over-engineered to withstand whatever abuse it might face. One afternoon, about 8 months after everything went down, I was in my garage working on a custom entertainment center when a car pulled up. I didn't recognize the vehicle, a silver Honda sedan. A woman in her 30s got out, looking nervous. "Are you Daniel Watson?" she asked. "That's me," I said, setting down my sander. "Can I help you?" "I hope so. My name is Emily Brennan. I live in the Sunrise Ridge development, about 20 miles north of here. Our HOA president has been, well, he's been doing something similar to what happened to you. Destroying property, issuing bogus violations, threatening people. I saw your story online and I was wondering if you could give me some advice." I gestured for her to come into the garage, out of the afternoon sun. "What's he been doing?" She pulled out her phone and showed me photos, slashed tires, broken fence posts, even a smashed window, all targeting homeowners who had challenged HOA decisions. "His name is Richard Brenner. He's been president for 9 years. People are terrified of him. We've tried reporting him to the police, but without evidence, they say it's just neighborhood disputes." "You need cameras," I said immediately. "Good ones, hidden, with cloud backup. Document everything, every violation notice, every interaction, every incident. Build a case that's so airtight he can't talk his way out of it." We spent an hour going over strategies. I gave her the names of the camera systems I had used, Marcus Reynolds' contact information, and advice on dealing with the police when you have evidence of criminal behavior. By the time she left, she looked determined instead of scared. "Thank you," she said. "Seriously, people like you give the rest of us hope that we don't just have to put up with this stuff." After she drove away, I thought about what she had said. I hadn't set out to become some kind of anti-HOA crusader. I had just wanted to live peacefully in my house with my ranch-style mailbox. But sometimes standing up for yourself inspires others to do the same. And maybe that was worth all the hassle. 3 months later, I got an email from Emily. Richard Brenner had been arrested for vandalism and harassment after cameras caught him slashing tires. The Sunrise Ridge HOA had voted to remove him and was pressing charges. She thanked me again and said the neighborhood was already improving. I printed that email and hung it in my garage right next to my workbench. A reminder that sometimes the fight is worth it. The Painted Mesa HOA continued to evolve. They hired a professional management company to handle day-to-day operations, taking the burden off volunteer board members and reducing the potential for power-tripping individuals to cause problems. Quarterly meetings became actually productive, focusing on neighborhood improvements and addressing legitimate concerns. At one memorable meeting, about a year after Patricia's arrest, someone proposed creating a community beautification fund to help homeowners who wanted to make improvements but couldn't afford materials. The motion passed unanimously. It was exactly the kind of positive initiative that an HOA should support, building up the community instead of tearing people down over minor violations. Frank was elected to the board that same year. "Never thought I'd do this," he told me. "But after everything that happened, I figured someone needs to keep an eye on things, make sure we never end up with another Patricia." "You'll do great," I assured him. "Just remember, you're there to serve the community, not rule it." He laughed. "Trust me, I've learned that lesson. My dad would have loved the way things turned out." He was always big on standing up for yourself but doing it the right way. Smart, calculated, and within the rules. The reinforced mailbox was exactly his kind of solution. Totally legal, completely effective, and just a little bit mischievous. I thought about him every time I checked my mail, seeing that sturdy post standing firm against whatever the world might throw at it. It was more than just a mailbox now. It was a statement, a line in the sand, a reminder that bullies, whether they're on a playground or running an HOA board, only have power if you give it to them. The Desert Springs Gazette ran a follow-up story on the one-year anniversary of the incident. They interviewed several Painted Mesa residents about how the neighborhood had changed. Tom Phelps talked about his rose garden. Linda Martinez mentioned feeling comfortable parking her work van in her driveway. David Morrison discussed how the new board had approved his solar panels without hassle. The reporter, a young woman named Jessica Price, asked me if I had any regrets. I thought about it carefully before answering. I regret that it had to go as far as it did, I said honestly. I wish Patricia had just been reasonable from the start. Nobody had to get arrested or sued or publicly humiliated. But I don't regret standing up for myself. Sometimes you have to fight for what's right, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. The article ended with a photo of my mailbox still standing tall and undamaged, with the mountains in the background. The caption read, "The mailbox that changed a neighborhood." It was a bit dramatic, but not entirely wrong. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. My business thrived. I made friends beyond just Frank, building real connections with people in the neighborhood who no longer had to worry about Patricia's constant surveillance and petty complaints. We had backyard barbecues, helped each other with home projects, and actually acted like a community. I even started dating someone I met at the hardware store, a woman named Zara Thompson who worked as a landscape architect. She found the whole mailbox saga hilarious. "Most guys try to impress women with their cars or their jobs," she teased. "You lead with civil disobedience against an HOA. That's a new one." "It wasn't civil disobedience," I protested. "It was completely legal." "Malicious compliance then," she said with a grin. "Even better." We started spending more time together, and she helped me redesign my front yard to be more water efficient with native plants. The HOA approved the changes without a single issue. Gerald even complimented the design at a neighborhood meeting. "See," Zara said as we planted the last of the desert marigolds. "This is what an HOA should be. Encouraging good practices, not micromanaging paint colors." Patricia's old house sold to a young family with 2 kids. The Martins were friendly, enthusiastic, and blissfully unaware of the drama that had unfolded in the neighborhood. Their kids played in the street, drew with chalk on the sidewalk, and generally brought a lot of joy to Sagebrush Lane. Nobody complained about the chalk art or the occasional toys left in yards. It was refreshing. I ran into Patricia one more time about 18 months after her arrest. I was at a Home Depot in Scottsdale picking up supplies for a client project when I saw her in the lighting aisle. She looked smaller somehow, less imposing. She saw me too, and for a moment we just stared at each other. Finally, she walked over. "Daniel," she said quietly, "I owe you an apology. I hadn't expected that." "Okay, I let the power go to my head. I thought I was protecting the neighborhood, maintaining standards, but really I was just being a bully." She looked down at her hands. "The therapy I've been doing, it's made me realize how toxic my behavior was, how much damage I did. I'm sorry." She sounded sincere, broken but sincere. "I accept your apology," I said after a moment. "I hope you're doing better." "I am. We're happy in the condo. No HOA, no responsibilities except to ourselves. It's what I should have done years ago instead of making everyone else miserable." She hesitated. "How's the neighborhood?" "Good," I said honestly. "Really good. People are happy." She nodded slowly. "I'm glad. I know I don't deserve to be, but I'm glad." We parted ways after that. I never saw her again, but I heard she had gotten involved in volunteer work at a homeless shelter. Maybe she was genuinely trying to make amends. I hoped so. Everyone deserves a chance at redemption, even former HOA tyrants. The years passed. The neighborhood continued to thrive under reasonable management. My business grew enough that I hired an assistant, a skilled woodworker named Miguel who had recently moved to Arizona from California. Zara and I got engaged, planning a small wedding in her parents' backyard in Tucson. My mailbox remained standing, a silent sentinel that had become oddly famous in local HOA reform circles. I occasionally got emails from homeowners across the country asking for advice on dealing with their own HOA nightmares. I always tried to help, sharing lessons I had learned. Document everything, know your rights, build a community of support, and never be afraid to stand up for yourself within the bounds of the law. One particularly satisfying email came from a man in Florida who had successfully sued his HOA for harassment after installing cameras similar to mine. "Your story gave me the courage to fight back," he wrote. "Thank you for showing that individuals can win against these petty dictators." I framed that email too, hanging it next to Emily's in my garage. It was a good reminder of why the fight had mattered. The Desert Springs City Council eventually passed an ordinance limiting HOA enforcement powers, requiring mediation before fines could be assessed and creating an appeals process through the city for disputed violations. Several council members credited my case as inspiration for the reform. No homeowner should live in fear of their own neighborhood association, Councilwoman Andrea Phillips said at the bill signing. HOAs serve a purpose, but they need oversight and accountability like any other organization with power over people's lives. Frank showed me the article about the ordinance, grinning. "You started something, you know, real change. I just wanted to check my mail in peace," I said. But I was smiling too. The wedding happened on a perfect October day, warm sun and clear blue skies. Friends from the neighborhood attended, including Frank and his wife Mary, the Phelps, the Morrisons, even Gerald and Susan from the HOA board. We celebrated in Zara's parents' beautiful desert garden, surrounded by people we cared about. During the reception, Frank gave a toast that had everyone laughing. I've known Daniel for a few years now, and I can say without exaggeration that he's the only person I know who went to war with an HOA president over a mailbox and won. Most of us just fantasize about standing up to petty tyrants. Daniel actually did it, and he did it with style, intelligence, and an impressive amount of steel-reinforced concrete. The crowd applauded and cheered. Zara squeezed my hand. "You're never going to live that mailbox down, are you?" "Apparently not," I said. "But that's okay, worse things to be known for." We moved into Zara's house after the wedding, which was in a different neighborhood without an HOA. The freedom was incredible. We painted the front door a bright turquoise because we felt like it. We installed a quirky modern mailbox shaped like a cactus because it made us laugh. Nobody sent violation notices or threatened fines. We just lived our lives, but I kept my house in Painted Mesa as a rental property, managed by a local company. The renters were a nice retired couple who loved the neighborhood and took great care of the place. They thought the mailbox story was hilarious and took pride in having the famous mailbox in their front yard. I drove by occasionally to check on the property and visit Frank. The neighborhood continued to flourish. New families moved in, the community garden expanded. The streets stayed clean and well maintained, not through threats and fines, but through people actually caring about where they lived. That's the thing about communities. They work best when people feel invested and valued, not controlled and micromanaged. Patricia had never understood that. She thought fear and authority were the same as respect and compliance. But fear only works until someone decides they've had enough. On one visit, about 3 years after the mailbox incident, I found a group of kids playing near my old house. They were riding bikes, laughing, just being kids. One of them had wiped out and scraped his knee on the sidewalk. I helped him up, made sure he was okay, and watched as he rode off to rejoin his friends. That simple moment felt like the real victory. Kids could just be kids. Families could just live their lives. Homeowners could make reasonable choices about their property without fear of retaliation. The neighborhood was a community again, not a fiefdom. I thought about everything that had happened, from that first violation notice about my blue door to Patricia's arrest to the reforms that followed. It had been stressful, expensive, and sometimes scary, but it had been worth it. Not just for me, but for everyone who came after. As I drove home to Zara that evening, past desert landscapes turning gold in the sunset, I felt a deep sense of peace. I had bought that house in Desert Springs looking for a fresh start, for a place to build a life. What I found instead was a fight worth fighting and a lesson worth learning. That standing up for yourself, done smartly and legally, can change more than just your own situation. It can change an entire community. My reinforced mailbox still stands in front of that house on Sagebrush Lane, checking the mail for whoever lives there, completely indestructible and utterly ordinary looking. A monument to the power of malicious compliance and the importance of standing your ground. And somewhere in Scottsdale, Patricia is probably living a quieter life, hopefully a wiser one. I don't wish her ill. I just hope she learned what I did. That power without accountability corrupts, that communities thrive on respect rather than fear, and that sometimes the smallest acts of resistance can lead to the biggest changes. Frank sent me a photo last Christmas. The whole neighborhood gathered for a holiday party in the community garden. Smiling faces everywhere, kids running around, pure joy. No one was worried about violation notices or approved color schemes or HOA drama. They were just neighbors celebrating together. I showed the photo to Zara. "That's what I fought for," I said. "That right there." She kissed my cheek. "I'm proud of you. Even if you did pick a fight with an HOA over a mailbox." "She picked the fight," I corrected. "I just finished it." And that's exactly what happened. Patricia picked a fight with the wrong homeowner, someone who knew his rights, was willing to stand up for himself, and had the patience to build an airtight case. She thought she could bully me into submission like she had done to so many others. Instead, she crashed her Escalade into an immovable object, both literally and figuratively. The story became part of Desert Springs local lore, A cautionary tale about HOA overreach and a feel-good story about one person making a difference. Schools used it as an example in civics classes about standing up for your rights within the legal system. Local news brought it up every time HOA reform was discussed. For me, though, it was never about fame or becoming a symbol. It was always just about being able to live in peace in the house I had bought with money I had earned. It was about honoring my dad's memory with that mailbox he had helped me choose. It was about drawing a line and saying this far, no further. Miguel, my assistant, once asked me if I would do anything differently if I could go back. I thought about it for a long time before answering. I would have installed the cameras sooner, I finally said. Evidence is everything. Without those videos, it would have been her word against mine, and she had the weight of the HOA behind her. But once I had proof, game over. So yeah, cameras earlier, otherwise, I wouldn't change a thing. He nodded thoughtfully. My cousin is dealing with something similar in his neighborhood. Can I give him your number? Sure, I said. Always happy to help someone stand up to an abusive HOA, and that became another unexpected consequence of the mailbox wars. I became an informal consultant for people dealing with HOA harassment. I never charged anyone, just shared advice and strategies that had worked for me. Marcus Reynolds even referred clients to me for the practical side of building evidence cases. You've found your calling, Zara teased one evening after I spent an hour on the phone with a frustrated homeowner in Nevada. HOA warrior, you should get business cards. Please no. I laughed. I just want to help people. I remember how alone I felt when Patricia was targeting me. If I can save someone else that stress, it's worth a phone call. But she wasn't entirely wrong. Over time, I did become something of a local advocate for HOA reform. I testified before the city council twice more on different proposed regulations. I spoke at a community organizing workshop about effective documentation and evidence gathering. I even wrote an article for a homeowner rights website about my experience. The message was always the same. Know your rights, document everything, stay within the law, and don't be afraid to stand up to bullies. Whether those bullies run an HOA or anything else, the principles remain constant. Power without accountability corrupts, and ordinary people have more strength than they realize if they're willing to use it wisely. Years later, when Zara and I had our first child, a daughter we named Diana, I found myself thinking about what kind of world I wanted her to grow up in. A world where people stood up for themselves, where communities supported each other instead of tearing each other down, where authority figures were held accountable for their actions. The mailbox incident, as silly as it sounds, represented all of that. It was about refusing to be bullied, about fighting smart instead of fighting angry, about building a case so strong that the truth couldn't be denied. Those were lessons I wanted Diana to learn. When she was old enough, I'd tell her the story of how her dad went to war with an HOA president over a mailbox and won. How he built something that couldn't be broken, gathered evidence that couldn't be refuted, and stood up for what was right even when it was difficult. And I'd tell her that she could do the same thing in her own life, whatever challenges she faced. But that was years away. For now, I focused on building furniture, loving my wife, and occasionally advising frustrated homeowners on how to deal with overzealous HOAs. It was a good life, hard-earned and deeply appreciated. The mailbox still stands, of course. It will probably outlast all of us, that steel-reinforced monument to the power of creative problem-solving and principled resistance. Frank jokes that it should have a historical marker. Here stands the mailbox that brought down an HOA tyrant. Let all who pass remember, don't mess with a man's mail. I wouldn't go that far, but I understood the sentiment. Sometimes small things matter. Sometimes standing up for yourself over something that seems trivial is actually standing up for something much larger. Your right to live your life without unreasonable interference. Your right to be treated with respect in your own community. Your right to fight back when someone abuses their authority. Patricia learned that lesson the hard way. The Painted Mesa neighborhood learned it too, in a more positive way. And through my story spreading online and through local news, thousands of other people learned it as well. I never set out to be an advocate or a symbol. I just wanted to check my mail. But life has a funny way of pushing us into roles we never expected. The key is to embrace those roles authentically, to stay true to your principles, and to remember why you started fighting in the first place. For me, it was always about that mailbox, the one my dad helped me pick out, the one Patricia destroyed 3 times, the one I rebuilt stronger than anyone expected. It represented home, family, personal autonomy, and the simple dignity of being left alone to live your life. And in the end, that mailbox did more than survive Patricia's attacks. It became a symbol of resistance against petty tyranny everywhere. It inspired reforms that helped thousands of homeowners. It built a community that was stronger and healthier than before. Not bad for 8 inches of steel pipe and some decorative woodwork. As I sit here now, watching the sunset over the Arizona desert, my wife beside me and my daughter sleeping peacefully inside, I think about how far we've all come. The neighborhood is thriving. The HOA is functional and fair. Patricia is hopefully finding peace in her new life. And my mailbox stands eternal, checking the mail for whoever needs it. Sometimes the simplest acts of defiance create the most lasting change. Sometimes standing your ground is exactly what the world needs. And sometimes, just sometimes, building an indestructible mailbox is an act of revolution. I learned all of that from an HOA president named Patricia, who made the mistake of thinking she could bully me into submission. She was wrong. And that wrongness changed everything, for me, for the neighborhood, and for everyone who heard the story and realized they didn't have to accept abuse from petty authorities. So here's to strong mailboxes, good neighbors, reformed HOAs, and the courage to stand up for yourself when it matters. Here's to building things that last and fighting battles worth fighting. Here's to my dad, who taught me to be strong but smart. And here's to everyone out there dealing with their own HOA nightmares. Document everything, know your rights, build your case, and never ever give up, because sometimes the good guys actually win. And when they do, it makes all the struggle worthwhile.